Hello and welcome to yet another episode of KCC Revision. My name is Edwin Nyongesa. If you want to support this channel, please hit the subscription button, share, like, and comment to reach more people. Now, I had promised that I would go through a sample essay from the compulsory set texts and also from the optional set texts. But again, allow me to take you through Fathers of Nations. Many questions, I've received many concerns that students do not understand this text. They think Fathers of Nations is very difficult and the scope way beyond their level. But I want to tell you that this is the perfect replacement for that is Blossoms of the Savannah. This is a very straightforward book, and I want you to think political. If you want to understand Fathers of Nation, you have to think political. Without thinking political, you will not understand this novel. Remember, these are political satire by Paul B. Vitta, satirizing the African politics. African politics that is marred by corruption, by negative ethnicity. It's marred by incompetence, military overthrows or coup d'etats and what have you. It's marred by all form of ineffective leadership. So for you to understand this book, you have to think in the direction of politics. You have to go political in order to appreciate Fathers of Nations. So what exactly is Fathers of Nations? Fathers of Nations is the honorific title given to heads of state, especially the founding fathers. So this book is addressing those presidents in Africa that took over power immediately after independence, having fought for independence, and the political landscape, the climate, political climate in Africa during that time. It is a satire. It is mocking the African leadership, that the African leadership is ineffective. The African leadership has been reduced to puppets and so on. Now, Fathers of Nations is referring to 50 heads of state, and by 50 heads of state, I mean 50 problems that Africa is experiencing. They're having a summit in Banjul the Gambia at Pinnacle Hotel to deliberate a document. They deliberate over a document called Way Omega, a document that has been put forward by 20 Nobel Peace Prize Laureates. Clever guys have put up a document called Way Omega that is going to help Africa. It's going to put Africa on a new path of development, on a new trajectory of development. If adopted, Africa will be free from civil wars. Africa will be free from corruption, impunity, and what has been bedeviling Africa, the African continent, for ages. So it is the reason why all the heads of state in Africa are convening in a summit in Banjul the Gambia to deliberate over this document called Way Omega. And so for you to understand this book, you have to understand the stories of 5 or 6 guys, around 5 guys. First, there are 4 guys who have been sent to the meeting as observers. Professor Kimani Karanja, the Institute of Development at the University of Nairobi from Kenya, has been sent there. And each of these guys has a grudge with their government. So we have Kimani Karanja from Kenya. Kimani Karanja arrives at Seamount Hotel and is given the Eastern Wing or the East Wing because he's from Eastern Africa. We'll also have Ngobile Melusi from Zimbabwe, comrade and resident of Zimbabwe, who arrives and is given the South Wing because he's from Southern Africa. We also have engineer Tahir Seif from Libya, who is given the Northern Wing or the North Wing because he's from Northern Africa. And then also, of course, another one to check in is Pastor Chineke Chiamaka, who is given the West Wing because he's from Western Africa. This is a guy from Lagos, Nigeria. If you understand the story of those four guys, they are observers, and all these observers, four of them, have been sent to the summit where presidents are going to deliberate over a document called Way Omega. Then we'll have understood Fathers of Nations. And remember, all of the four guys that I've mentioned, Ngobile Melusi, Professor Kimani Karanja, Pastor Chineke Chiamaka, and Engineer Tahir Saif, all of them have a grudge against their government. It is symbolic of all the states of Africa and the state of mediocrity in the continent. Well, so these four guys have been sent to the summit as observers, and they do not know of each other's presence. They don't know, they think they're alone, but unknown to them, there are four of them, and then they have their guide, Dr. Abiola Afolabi, who is a lecturer at University of Ibadan, Nigeria. Very clever guy who studied at Harvard University. So he's their guide. Remember, Dr. Afolabi has been sent to the summit to advise the president on the document. He's a very clever guy who has written books and what have you. So he's the only one who knows that about the four guys' presence. He knows them by name. They have not met physically. But again, he's there to guide the president. So remember I told you that 50 heads of state are meeting in Banjul, the Gambia, to deliberate over a document called Way Omega. Unknown to them, there is another parallel document called Path Alpha, that's being fronted by AGDA, that is AGDA. AGDA is Agency for Governance and Development in Africa, led by their special projects director called Tad Longway. So Tad Longway is in charge of special projects for AGDA. AGDA has a document that is rivaling Way Omega, a document that is said to be deliberated upon by the heads of state. So it is Tad Longway that will approach the four guys, those that have personal vendetta against their governments. So what is the stories of these four guys? Professor Kimani Karanja, after the dismantling of the East African University, Professor Kimani Karanja, who was at Oxford, wrote back home in Kenya, because after dismantling of the East African University, there was the formation of the University of Nairobi. And then there was that vacancy in the Institute of Development at the University of Nairobi. So when he went there, he was given a post of senior lecturer, and he fought for relevance of the university to society. And because of his activism, he got promoted to the rank of a professor, and he won the heart of the campus beauty queen by the name of Sia Omondi, beautiful woman, fell in love, and then they had children. A child, rather, not even children, just one child conceived in Tunisia, and they named her Tuni in reference to the country of her conception, Tunisia. And so his life, that is Professor Kimani's life, seemed like a perfect life until the economic recess came. Jobs were lost, salaries were cut, joblessness became rampant. And so there is a military coup by MPs. It's a coup by MPs, not a military coup, but a coup by MPs. That initially professors used to earn more than MPs, but at the moment MPs were raking in salary 100 times more than professors. So his life became stuck. There was no more progress. He has a very old and time Toyota car, and of course that one forms the basis of his conflict. That is because of the car. Tuni asks if he could use the car, and look at what Professor Kimani has to say. That I'm sorry, our car broke down again. I'll fix it when I get my next salary. It means he's living in a very not good condition. And even look at where they're having their ice cream, in a low-end restaurant somewhere in Nairobi. So again, you look at the life of Professor and it's not good. So because of this, Tunisia Tuni has to use public means, and that is how she meets her end. She dies in a freaky road accident. And because of this, in summary, Asia Omondi, or Sia as fondly referred to by Professor Kimani, files for divorce. There was a colleague of Professor Kimani Karanja at the University of Nairobi, his junior actually, called Newborn Walom, who had quit teaching and went to vie after his predecessor was killed when he was drunk, wobbling out of the bar. And so he won the parliament seat. And now he is a member of parliament. So when Tuni died, it was like the last straw for Asia Omondi, or Sia. She feels Professor Kimani Karanja has nothing left. You see, that it is because of him that their daughter died in a freak road accident, because he did not have a proper car. And so she files for divorce at the age of 60. At the age of 60, she files for divorce, and she's going to marry Newborn Walom, the MP, this junior guy, junior to Professor Kimani Karanja. It's because of this that Kimani Karanja confronts him at his office, and they get into a physical brawl and they fight, and Professor Kimani Karanja gets booked for demeaning the name of the university and gets his 6 months in jail, and is demoted from being a professor back to his starting rank as a senior lecturer. And so because of this, he gets annoyed with the government. That is the story of Professor Kimani Karanja. When he's approached by Tad Longway, the man in charge of special projects at AGDA, he does not decline, because he will meet his president and maybe vent his feelings. Story of Kimani Karanja. What about this story of that is Pastor Chineke Chiamaka? He used to drive dangerously. One day, after dropping his brother Obina at the University of Lagos, he drove back. He would drive in the wrong lane and he got involved in an accident, but he survived. He came out unscathed, and he turned his life around and said, "This is actually God." And because of that, he begins a church. But he used to preach politics on the pulpit, and the government of Nigeria booked him in for 2 weeks and banned him from preaching. When he's approached by Tad Longway to go to the summit in Banjul the Gambia, he does not decline, because he would meet the president and ask him maybe some of these questions. Because remember, all African presidents are meeting in Banjul the Gambia to deliberate over this document called Way Omega. Story of engineer Tahir Saif, or Saif Tahir. He went to study in Paris, that is weapon development, so that he could come back and develop weapons for his country, Libya. And sure enough, when he came back, under the Ministry of Defense, there was a department called Fist of Allah, and that's where he used to work. But Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group, hit, and America was to retaliate. And because of this, the president of Libya dismantled Fist of Allah, something that is Engineer Taif Sair thought was a great sin. He looked at Fist of Allah as a sacred. So he looked at it and said, this is a great sin. It was dismantled. But it also coincided with an accident that he had. He had fallen in love with his junior colleague at the Fist of Allah. When he approached her and told her if they could go out for a date, she said no, but she didn't mean to say no, and he took it badly. And later on, when she was moving her veil in order to get in the laboratory for weapon development, he goes ahead and slaps her, because it was Holy Week of Heritage Week, Holy Week. And she had later opened a very sharp hit back. Unfortunately, it caught engineer Taif Sair's left eye, severing it, and he lost his eye, and he had to be replaced with a foreign object. And he had lost his job at Feast of Allah because the president had dismantled it. And so he had a grudge with the government. When he is approached by Tad Longway, he does not refuse. The last story is the story of that is Comrade Melusi from Zimbabwe. He fought for independence with the current leader of Zimbabwe, called the Bomber. They fought hard to chase away Smith, the white man. After independence, the Bomber, who is the current leader of Zimbabwe, realized that this is actually Ndebele, that Ngobile Melusi is Ndebele, and he was Shona. And he began discrimination. We didn't even give him the seat of minister as he had promised. He began open discrimination in the sense that Ngobile Melusi and his people, it's like they are faced out of Harare, the capital. And most of them had to contend living in Bulawayo, where, of course, the Ndebele are. He began slum clearance, that is destroying people's shops and property and what have you, without arranging for an alternative accommodation. Then at a point, Ngobile Melusi decided that he's going to run for president. And of course, they lost. The Bomber won by 99% of the votes cast. But that was the beginning of his troubles, because his wife is killed by the Bomber, Ziliza. His wife Ziliza is killed by the Bomber. And so this guy has a grudge against the government for the discrimination, for the negative ethnicity. And so at the end of it all, when he's approached by Tad Longway for AGDA, he does not resist. He enlists and says he will attend the summit as an observer. Remember, they are attending the summit in order to give weight to the rivaling document called Path Alpha, rivaling document to weigh Omega. Now, we also have this journalist. Remember, there is USA coming in through Voice of Africa. We have the journalist Fiona Mackenzie, who was raised by his Scottish missionaries. She's been hired on loan by Voice of America, the bureau that is led by Robert Manley, and the technician Nicholas Sentinel. And so she's been hired so that she could, remember, these guys are snooping on conversations at the summit. America is an uninterested party in that particular summit, and it is made to believe that maybe they're siding with AGDA, and that is Path Alpha and what have you. So we also have America that is coming in. But most importantly also is the guide. Remember Dr. Afolabi, who is the guide to these four guys. Dr. Afolabi and the story of Dr. Afolabi and his wife Pamela. Remember how they met. Remember Afolabi studied at Harvard University. He met a white woman by the name Pamela. And when they married, Pamela felt Africa has so many children, and that they didn't need children at all, because there were so many children and in Africa, and they didn't want to add to the pool of children. On the other hand, Dr. Folabi felt, being an African, he wanted a child. And so this one led to an impasse or a stalemate. They didn't adopt, they didn't have their own biological children. Until one day when Dr. Folabi had gone to America, Washington, D.C. to give a keynote address, and he tagged his wife along because that's their home. Just in summary, when they were coming back home, he's approached by Tad Longway, who insists that he should sit in the economy, and the wife went to VIP. And the wife was not happy about the incident. But most importantly, when they arrive home, they find that Dr. Folabi's relatives, they are Africans. They have brought in a child, a girl, to be his wife. Name of the girl is Nimbo, brought in by Afolabi's cousin Femi. And the wife does not want to listen. He thinks that Afolabi is part of the plan, of the conspiracy. And she goes away, and later on, after a week or so, she files for a divorce. That is the story of Dr. Afolabi, who is attending the summit to advise the president. So what happens at the summit? These guys, a summit is a total waste of money. A summit this particular summit is just an inconvenience. Insecurity in water rationing and what have you, traffic snarl-ups and what have you. And this summit is a mockery. Paul B. Vitta satirizing it. And in the sense that even these guys, these presidents have not read the document, where Omega is proposing a term limit, is proposing, end of civil wars and coups and what have you. But these presidents, some of them are presidents for life. They don't want to relinquish power. These presidents ascended to power through bloody coups and what have you. So again, it's a great, great mockery. And just in summary, another document is introduced, that is Path Alpha, introduced by Dr. Folabi. And he begs people, the president, the excellencies, to have a look at it. And they have no problem with it, apart from, of course, a few and Minister Zinto and what have you. And both the documents are good. They feel both the documents are good. And Path Alpha is somehow maybe superior over Way Omega. Way Omega is rich on ideas, but when it comes to implementation, it is difficult. But Path Alpha is bottom led. Very is pressing a bird in your hand as compared to those birds in the bushes suggested by Way Omega. And so the mockery comes out when the chair, President Bangora, the chair of the method committee, they have to come up with a method on which, a formula in which they are going to determine which document to adopt as a common development strategy for Africa. And the method committee led by President Bangora, in a French-speaking African nation, has to toss a coin. Look at the mockery, has to toss a coin, and even look at President Dibonzo, the insecurity that he causes around. These presidents, in summary, these presidents are troublemakers. They are troublemakers, and you can look at what Dibonzo does, and that is the reason why the presidents do not attend the closing ceremony and the banquet that had been arranged specifically for them. When the coin is tossed, it is Path Alpha that wins the day, and maybe it is going to be adopted as a common development strategy for Africa. In summary, we are saying that maybe Africa does not need a development document, a document to develop. Maybe what Africa needs is selfless leaders who are ready to implement and use the resources prudently in order to realize development for all the people. So that is it. That is Fathers of Nations for you. I know I've skipped some bits because of course, it doesn't have to be a very long and boring session. But again, that is Fathers of Nations. And yeah, if you like this content, please support us by liking, sharing, commenting. You can also subscribe to this channel. So until next time, it is bye-bye.